many occasions, but I need for you to listen at what the Lord is going to say to you today. Father, I stretch my hand. Come on, I know it's old school, but help me anyhow. To thee. This ain't for you, this is for me now. No one the help I know if thou withdraw thyself from me. Come on, church, let me hear you. Oh, where thou shalt I go. Some of you may be tired of my prayer hymn, but when you sing it, you ain't tired. When you sing it, realize that I sing that for me because of the assignment that I have. I ain't trying to get you ready, I'm trying to get me ready. And when you sing it, you're helping me to get ready to deliver this word. And you'll be blessed as a result of the word. Now, it's a very familiar text, Mark chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. And again, he entered into Capernaum after some days, and it was noised that he was in the house. And straightway many were gathered together, insomuch that there was no room to receive them, no, not so much as about the door. And he preached the word unto them. And they come unto him, bringing one sick of the palsy, which was born of 4. And when they could not come nigh unto him for the press, they uncovered the roof where he was. And when they had broken it up, they let down the bed wherein the sick of the palsy lay. When Jesus saw their faith, he said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. Can you look again at verse 4? Our subject will be extracted from verse 4. And when they could not come nigh or near unto him for the press or for the crowd, they uncovered the roof where he was. When they could not come near to him because of the crowd, they uncovered the roof where he was. And when they had broken it up, they let down the bed wherein the sick of the palsy lay. Touch somebody and tell them, tear the roof off. Tear the roof off. One of the things that I love about the Bible is its richness, its profundity. The Bible is rich. The Bible is profound. In fact, it is so rich and profound until you can read a particular text a number of times, but the next time you read it, God can give you a different revelation. You've been looking at that text for 10 years, and you thought you had it all, or you thought you had extracted everything from that text. But you can look at it one more time, and you will discover a revelation in the text that you did not see the last time. I discovered this when I looked at Mark chapter number 2, because the last time that I looked at Mark chapter 2, I looked at it in the context of how Jesus healed a paralyzed man. And that part of the text is still there. It has not been deleted. And that is the context that I looked at Mark chapter number 2, in the context of Jesus healing a paralyzed man. Many of you are familiar with this narrative, and it is a clear narrative that a paralyzed man was placed on a bed, and he was carried by 4 men to Jesus after they heard that Jesus was in the house. That's how I looked at it the last time that I visited this Mark chapter 2 passage. They carried him to Jesus because they heard that Jesus was in the house, and after they brought the guy to Jesus, the text tells us that the guy is now healed. That's a pretty good place to shout. The fact that the guy is now healed after they brought him to Jesus. Here is a guy who could not previously walk or move. Here is a guy who had no use of his legs and his limbs. But after he came in contact with the miracle worker, after he came in contact with a man named Jesus, a guy who had no use of legs or limbs, a guy who could not move or walk can now move and walk, but it was after he came in contact with Jesus. Now that's still in the text, and that's still good shouting stuff. That's normally how I preach this text, and that's still good material. It has not been taken out of the text. It has not been deleted. For those who missed it again, a guy who could not walk or move, but they brought him to Jesus, and this guy who could not walk or move can now walk and move. He has the use of his legs and his limbs. Y'all don't believe me, do you? I know the guy is healed. And the reason why I know he is healed, because I watched him in verse number 3. It is in verse number 3 when I saw him, the bed was carrying him. But I kept watching him until I got to verse number 12. I now see the guy carrying the bed. You still didn't catch me. Before Jesus, the bed was carrying him. But after Jesus, he's carrying the bed. And we still have a God who will tell you to pick up your bed and walk, because whenever you come in contact with Jesus, something ought to change in your life. I ought to have about 15 witnesses that can say, I came to Jesus just as I was. I was wearied, I was wounded and sad, but I found in him a sweet old resting place, and he's made me glad. I'm shouting if I have to shout all by myself. I like this illustration. I like this story, ladies and gentlemen. And the reason why I like it is because it reminds me of a time when I had nothing else left, and I needed a miracle. Maybe you've never been there. Maybe you've never had more month than money. Maybe your money never been funny, and your change never been, has it? Maybe you've never been between a rock and a hard place. But I've been there, and I believe I'm not by myself. And I needed a miracle. Friends couldn't help me. Connections couldn't help me. Family didn't have no money. I had nobody but Jesus. And he worked a miracle in my life. And I ought to have about 22 people who can throw your hand in the air and say, he worked that same miracle. And I've come today to tell somebody, I don't care how dark it looks, he's still in the miracle working business. Oh, y'all ought to help me preach. Touch somebody and tell them he can still turn it around. He can still work a miracle in your life. He can still heal the sick. He can still raise the dead. God has not changed. If he did it, I'm feeling all right. On yesterday, he can do it now. That's the angle that normally I preach this text from, and it's a good angle. But there's another angle I want to look at on today. I want us to consider a different angle as we maneuver through the text on this morning. Y'all got time for me to tell you about it? I want to call your attention to the intentionality that I see in the text. This is our year of intentionality. 2024 is our year of intentionality. Am I in the right house? And so since it's our year of intentionality, I want to extract the intentionality that I see in this text. Now, we saw Jesus and we just talked about him. We saw the paralyzed man and we talked about him too. But when I speak today about intentionality that I see in the text, I'm not talking about the intentionality of Jesus now. I'm not talking about the intentionality of the lame man. Wait a minute, some of y'all looking at me funny. When I said I'm not talking about the intentionality of Jesus, now I know he's an intentional God. I heard Travis Green tell me that the other day in a song, that all things are working together for my good because he is an intentional God. Is there anybody here that knows he's an intentional God? I know God is intentional because he intentionally created and crafted the world. God was intentional. Now, I'm going to rub somebody the wrong way, but that's all right. I want to tell you, he was intentional when he made a man a man. And when he made a woman a woman. Y'all didn't like that? He was intentional when he flung the stars and put them in sky. He was intentional when he put the fish in the sea. He was intentional when he put the moo in a cow, the sizzle in a snake, the hump on a camel, the oink in a hog, the laugh in a hyena, the stripes on a zebra, the roar in the lion, and the stink in a skunk. He was. Shake somebody's hand and tell him he's intentional. Which means whatever he sets out to do, he does it the way he set out to do. He's an intentional God. And I could preach that today. Brother Grayson, I could preach about him being an intentional God. But that's not the intentionality that I want to look at in the text on today. Now, I want to look at the intentionality of the four brothers. We don't talk about them much. We don't talk about the brother. We talk about Jesus, and we ought to. We talk about the man who was paralyzed and healed, and we ought to. I don't want to talk about them too much today. I want to talk about this quartet. I want to talk about these four brothers who brought the lame man to Jesus. Remember now that the guy's paralyzed, which means that he could not bring himself to Jesus. Y'all do know what it means to be paralyzed, don't you? He couldn't bring himself to Jesus. This is significant because the paralyzed guy is no longer paralyzed, not because of his intentionality, but because of the intentionality of his brothers that he was connected to. Y'all missed it? The guy was connected to some intentional brothers. And he's healed, Reverend Wright, because of their, oh Lord, help me preach. Because of their intentionality. Let me pause parenthetically to tell you, in this year of intentionality, you got to make sure you hooked up with the right folk. Because you can be intentional, but you connected to some folk. I feel like who are not intentional. That's a major factor. If you're going to get what you're trying to get, you're going to have to change some folk in your crowd. Y'all need to disconnect from the wrong folk. Oh, y'all don't like me. That's my cousin. That's my cousin, Cousin Quita. I can't disconnect, but all Quita want to do is back it up and drop it like it's hot. Oh, Ray, that's my boy. You know, we've been boys a long time, but Ray got you howling at the wrong honeys. You got to change who you hooked up with. Some of y'all hooked up with negative folk, lazy folk, shabby folk, low-thinking folk, messy folk. And they'll talk you out of your intentionality. You were at the vision party yesterday, putting your vision together, but then you get home and you got somebody there who said, well, now, girl, I know somebody else who tried that same thing and they lost everything they had. Man, I know somebody else who went down that same road and they couldn't make it, but you ought to look at them in the eye and say, I don't care who failed. I don't care who did not make it. This is my dream. This is my vision. This is my goal. And I've got to be intentional if it's going to come to pass. cannot be hooked up with folk who have no intentionality in your life. But this paralyzed man had some buddies, and they were intentional about getting him to Jesus. Don't care what happened. We set out to get you to him, and we ain't gonna stop. Boy, that's the kind of folk I need to be hooked up to. Because sometimes you get weak along the way. Who am I talking to in here? Am I talking to anybody? You started out real good, but you get a little weak along the way. That's when the strong must bear the infirmity of the weak, because everybody will get a little weak and get a little depressed and get a little down. That's when I need somebody in my life that when I'm down, you don't put me further down. I'm already depressed. I told you shouldn't have done that. I don't need that Negro there. I need somebody who can say, Clinton, get back up. It's going to be all right. I know it looks dark right now. I know it looked like it ain't going to happen, but if God said it, you can count on it. I feel like lifting him up. The text says that Jesus has entered Capernaum. Here's the narrative. And the word spread it all over the community that he was in the house. There was a paralyzed man, let me give you the context, who had 4 buddies. And they heard about this miracle worker being in close proximity. Because these men were empathetic and not sympathetic, they were moved to carry their brother who could not carry himself. Let me try that again. Because they were empathetic and not just sympathetic. You see, some of y'all are sympathetic, but you ain't empathetic. Sympathetic means that I feel sorry for you. Child, I feel so bad. But empathy will move you to get up and do something about that person's condition. Some of y'all don't want to do nothing about that condition, but you want everybody else to help. You send them to somebody else. You send them to the church. You send them to the preacher. When you ought to do something about their condition if you have empathy. These men were compelled to do something about the condition of their brother. They put him on a bed. Y'all know the story? This is for those who don't know the story. Those of you who know the story, you really ought to be saying amen. They put him on a bed. They heard that Jesus was in the house. He's back in town. He had left Capernaum, but now he is back. They put him on a bed and said, we got to get him to Jesus. If we can just get him to Jesus, we believe that everything will be all right. But they got to the house and they ran into an obstacle. Because the text tells us that the house, Brother Sankey, was too crowded. See, it was a whole lot of folk who needed a miracle. Touch your neighbor and tell them, you ain't the only one need a miracle. Touch them on the other side and tell them, you ain't the only one who needs a miracle. There's a whole lot of people who needs a miracle. But what I love about God is that regardless to how many folk need a miracle, he's got the capacity. I wish I had a witness. He can work on your situation, work on my situation, and your situation, all at the same time. He's a miracle working God. They got to the house, and it was crowded in that house. Now, I want you to see the intentionality of these guys because, again, they started out with getting to Jesus in mind. And I think I ought to tell you that whatever is in your mind, Father, in the name of Jesus Christ, I pray now that whatever she's going through, I pray, God, that you'll touch her body right now. Pray now, church, if you will, that whatever is taking place, I know you're able, God. You can. I'm preaching about a God who can turn it around. And I believe that the God I serve can turn it around. How many can believe that today? Will you touch and agree? For our sister, they're going to take good care of her. And we believe God is going to do his part. Back to the intentionality that I see in the text. Stay with me if you will. These brothers were intentional, and that's a good thing. Because whenever you set out, listen to me good, to accomplish an assignment, you'll always run into some kind of obstacle. Now, I need to poll the house this morning. Who's in this house you've already run into something in 2024? I mean, you started out, come on, don't be ashamed, and you've already run into something. You came into the year with high hopes, lofty dreams. Raise your hand again. You've already run into something. I think I ought to tell you that whenever you set out to do something or accomplish an assignment, you will always run into something. But if you are intentional, you will not quit. You will not turn around. And I think I should tell you that if you're going to accomplish your goal, you got to hang in there because it ain't easy. And that's why you got to quit crying about what's going on, complaining about what's going on. It ain't easy for you. It ain't easy for me. It wasn't easy for these guys in the text. So if you run into something, you got to pick yourself up and put on your big boy britches, your big girl drawers, and go on. You knew it was going to be hard before you started. Touch 3 people and tell them you got to get over that. You got to get over how difficult it is. Yeah, I still feel like lifting him up. You got to get over how hard it is. If you're going to write that book, write it anyhow. If you're going to start that business, start it anyhow. Tell somebody, get over it. You got to have bulldog tenacity if you're going to get the job done. Give me a few more minutes, I'm done. I feel like running already. They got to the house and they were confronted with a large crowd. These men could have turned around. They had a real good excuse to say to their brother, we tried. Man, you see that house? You see that crowd? People are everywhere. Brother, we tried. Maybe we'll try the next time. Maybe there'll be another opportunity where the crowd is not so large and the obstacle is not so big. Have you been there, ladies and gentlemen? They could have said, they could have had a good excuse to quit, but they didn't quit. Can I tell you what happened? John looked at Sam. Sam looked at Titus. Titus looked at Timothy. And then all of them at the same time looked up. The door is blocked. The window is blocked. We going to the roof. And when we get to that roof, we gonna tear that sucker off and get our brother to where he can get some help. Shake somebody's hand and tell them sometimes you just gotta tear that sucker off. Folk done got in your way. Enemy on your trail. Shake another person's hand and tell them tear that sucker off. Don't quit. Don't throw in the towel. Tear the roof off. I got to get to where Jesus is. They tore that roof off. I ain't going to sit around here crying. Y'all done made enough excuses. Are y'all hearing me, Grace? You ought to say this to yourself. Don't get mad with me now. You can always find an excuse, Anthony, to quit. Des to quit. Molisha, you could always, did I say that right? She looked at me like I didn't say that. You can always find a reason to quit. Your dream ought to be big enough to give you a reason to keep going. I don't need no reason to quit. But when I look at what I have envisioned on my vision board, it ought to give me a reason to keep going. They could have said we tried. Oh, my time is up. They could have said we tried. I'm the pastor. I'm going to take a little bit more time than that. How about that? They could have quit. They could have given up. But they did not do that. Thank God that a lame man was connected to the right brothers. Now, preachers, y'all gonna catch this, and my crowd gonna catch it as well. You know how I know they were hooked up with the right brothers? Jesus, in essence, said that they were hooked up with, that he was hooked up with the right brothers. He, in essence, said it in verse 5. Because verse 5 said, and when Jesus saw their faith. You know, help me, big O. When he saw their, plural, didn't say the faith of the lame man. See, you know that you hooked up with the right folk when you hooked up with folk who got faith. When you hooked up with doubters and unbelievers, you with the wrong people. When Jesus saw their faith, they were hooked. He was hooked up with the right people. Y'all got to disconnect from haters, doubters, backstabbers. Let me see what else I got on here. And folk that's concerned about theirs and not yours. They tore the roof off. I'm done. This is the last page, I promise you. They tore the roof off. But I got plenty more in my spirit. They tore the roof off. Got their brother to Jesus. Jesus saw their faith. And now the guy is healed. That's a major connection. It's a major connection for this lame man. But I got one more thing I want to show you, and I'm going to try to hit the runway just a little bit. I got one more thing I want to show you. And what I'm going to show you is missing from the text. I don't see it in the text. What's missing in the text is the names of the four brothers. Now, I called them John and Tim and Sam and Titus, but I just made that up. That wasn't their name. We don't know their name. Watch verse 3. Give me verse 3. Watch what it says. And they come unto him, bringing one sick of the palsy, which was born of 4. Watch verse 4. And when they could not come nigh unto him for the press, they uncovered the roof where he was. And when, help me, had broken it up, they, come on, verse 5, let down the bed wherein the sick of the palsy lay. Verse 5, look at what it says. And when Jesus saw their faith, y'all missed it. And they come unto him, bringing one sick of the palsy, which was born of 4. And they could not come nigh unto him for the press. They uncovered the roof where he was. And when they had broken it up, they let down the bed wherein the sick of the palsy was. And when Jesus saw their faith, these men did a major favor for their brother. They carried him to Jesus. They had faith. And we don't even know their names. Let me tell you what we ought to call them. The anonymous they. Because they operated in anonymity. You didn't catch that. Everybody you connected to don't need their name called. Come on. If the only way you gonna help me is you got to tell everybody what you did for me, you can keep your funky pants. I don't need that sofa set that you done sat on 20 years. If you got to tell everybody, shake somebody's hand and tell them some stuff you ought to be anonymous. You ain't got to know my name. Give me E flat. Let me get out of here. And that's the kind of people we need in church, who ain't got to have their name called. Shake somebody's hand and tell them you ain't got to put my name on a pew. Tell them you ain't got to give me a plaque. Tell them I can operate in anonymity. I ain't got to have my name called. Those are the kind of people you need to be connected to. And they don't always remind you of what they did in your life. When Jesus saw their faith, these brothers were concerned about their lame brother. I like these men because they had their legs, but they were concerned about a brother who did not have his legs. And that's the kind of people that I need to be connected to. If you already got yours, you ought to help me to get mine, and let us go up together. I need to be connected to the right somebody, and that somebody need to be connected to my God. Quit marrying a woman because she fine. Quit marrying a man because he got a good job. But you ought to want to know if they have a relationship with a man named Jesus. it is obvious that these four men knew who Jesus was, because when they heard that Jesus was in the house, they said, we know this Jesus. We heard about a Jesus who turned water to wine. We heard about a Jesus who gave sight to the blind. We heard about a Jesus who healed a woman with the issue of blood. And if he did it for them, the Lord can do it for him. Ain't God all right? Lift your sanctified hand and say, Lord, do it. Lord, do it. Do it for me right now. If you did it for Paul and Silas, if you did it for Daniel, if you did it for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I know you can do it for me. Ain't God all right? How many know he can do it? I said, how many know that the Lord can do it? Shake somebody's hand. I feel like lifting him up. Shake a neighbor's hand like you're going to shake it off and tell him, neighbor, the Lord. Come on, tell them like you mean it. The Lord. Y'all ain't telling them that you mean it. The Lord. He's able. Shout like you know he's able. Shout like you know he's able. Praise him like you know it. Won't he turn it around? Won't he turn it around? Yes, he will. He can give you your dream. He can give you your vision. But you can't quit. But you can't turn around. Who am I talking to in here that can lift your sanctified hand and say, I don't feel no ways tired. I've come too far from where I started from. Come on, nobody told me. Nobody told me. Nobody told me the road would be easy, but I don't believe. I don't believe that the Lord brought me this far to leave me now, and I'm gonna get mine. Tell somebody I'm gonna get it. Tell them I'm gonna get it. If I have to break in, if I have to break in, if they lock the door, if they close the window, come on, tell your neighbor I'ma tear the roof off. Tell them I'ma tear that sucker off. I got to get mine. It's mine. And what God has for me, it is for me. Shake somebody's hand. Turn around and shake somebody's hand and tell them, neighbor, what God has for me, it is for me. And I got to get mine. Victory is mine. Joy is mine. Love is mine. Peace is mine. Happiness is mine. Come on, claim it. It's mine, it's mine. It's mine, it's mine. I'ma quit crying. I'ma quit complaining. I got joy. Is there anybody here that know you got joy? Lift your sanctified hand and say, this joy that I have, the world, the world didn't give it to me. The world can't take it away. Anybody gonna tear the roof off? Anybody gonna do whatever you got to do in order to get what you need to get? Oh, no. Let me quit.